Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another Tuesday Cruiser Chat with Otram. I just went totally brain dead. Uh, yeah, totally brain dead. I guess got the 80 series prototype for the new version of the 80 series stainless exhaust done. I found a shop in Maryland that'll do mandrel bending for me. So I'm going to run a batch of FJ62 exhaust next week and then take one of the 80 and one of the 62 up to Maryland and have them scan everything in so they can mandrel bend it all in one shot and hopefully make it faster for me to get exhausts built and out the door so it's not 6 months in between batches of them. I'm trying to think what else is new. Started rebuilding I think Norwegian H55F and split case today, converting it from a diesel input to a gas input and adding a drum brake for a 40 series onto the split case, which will be a cool project. I think that's about all that's fancy that's going on at the shop right now. All that's new. Otherwise we're working on just, regular repair work coming through the shop. Doing U-joints on a 200 series, 180K on 100 series, and some work on a 62. And then just a mix of other stuff that's just hanging around the shop. And hey, everybody that's tuning in. Normal Tuesday chat fashion, I don't have anything prepared, so whatever you guys want to talk about, whatever questions you've got, I'll do my best to try to answer them. Try to think if there's anything new and cool. The first batch of the second generation of 80 series crank tools came in last week from the water jet cutter. I got those broached and blasted and painted, so they're ready to rock and are up on the website. I moved the half-inch drive hole inboard a little bit to try to get more engagement with the half-inch breaker bar, and then I also added a 3/4 inch drive hole for those really stubborn crank bolts. We haven't broken a half-inch breaker bar yet, but we've had a couple people tell us that they broke half-inch breaker bars, so we added a 3/4 drive hole for those really stubborn bolts. So those are up on the website and ready to order. I think there's 5 of them left out of this batch. So I'll get another batch coming from the water jet cutter soon. To Vicken, I've done the transfer case re-gear on an 80. I've done underdrive, high range gears, and the lower low range gears. I have not done the spool. The spool shouldn't be any more difficult than the regular transfer case re-gear, though, since you've got the differential and all that jazz out while you're doing the re-gear. And I've got videos of them up in I think it's the 80 series playlist on the YouTube page. Into crypto, yeah, fuses could definitely be a cause. Fuses or like the light switch itself. I would lean probably more towards the light switch itself, like the park light switch, but I would check the fuses first. Without seeing it, it's hard to tell. And I don't know that I've ever tracked down I don't know if I've ever had to track down a dash light problem on a 94. And to Robert, yeah, the 80 series pretty much any gasket is going to be better factory than the aftermarket, unless you know which brand it was originally from the factory, and then you can track it down in the aftermarket. But the Toyota stuff seals and holds up much, much better than the aftermarket stuff, especially on the exhaust. In Dovhicken, we take the T-case out to do it. You can do it in the truck, but there's a couple of shims that go on the back bearings that you kind of have to stick in place and then sandwich the back half of the case on. And it's a real pain to do in the truck, because even if you put like sticky grease on them, the shims like to slide out. That, and if you're doing the low range gears, you're going to be grinding the case. So we like to do it. We like to do it out of the truck, so that you can like thoroughly wash all the grinding, all the shrapnel and everything out of the case once you're done. It just makes for a much easier job. And it's like 6 more bolts and a shift lever to get the thing out of the truck, rather than trying to fight it in the truck. And hey, how's it going, Sang? Glad you could make it. And I can hear my wife pulling up in the driveway, so I'm going to go greet her real quick so the dogs don't go nuts. I will be right back. Okay, yeah, I'm back. If I don't go and open the door, the dogs go nuts. And that is a good call with trailer possibility for lights going out. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, if the little trailer converter went bad, it could be shorting out the park light circuit. And I think the park light circuit also feeds your dash lights. I'm not positive though. But yeah, so I would check fuses first, because there's a chance a funky hitch converter or funky hitch wiring, like going back to the trailer, could have shorted out the park lights. Vacuum hoses on the Toyota stuff, depending on where you're located, like here in the States, it's hard to find metric-sized vacuum tubing that fits properly. The Imperial-sized stuff, it's either a little bit too tight or a little bit too loose, so I end up having to order metric tubing in, which, I mean, isn't a huge deal with the internet, but yeah, it's normally, at least locally, I can't find metric stuff in the parts stores, so you have to order it in. It comes in weird short sections when you get it from Toyota. I've never ordered it from them, but I've had customers bring me pieces that they had, gotten from Toyota. And the hoses, the factory Toyota hoses, like coolant hoses and that stuff, seem to hold up way better than the aftermarket stuff. We'll have trucks coming in from the 70s that still have factory, coolant hoses on them that still feel, decent. Uh, so yeah, I go Toyota hose when I can, especially for coolant. Vacuum, like Zach's saying, sometimes you can find stuff at the local stores that fit. I'm not that lucky, so I order in the metric stuff. And Ian, I saw that post go around Facebook this morning, but if you look, Kurt from Cruiser Outfitters made a post, I guess mid-morning, that he called somebody he knows at Toyota, and they basically said they weren't looking to axe the Toyota from the States. So, I don't know how I feel about it, but I doubt they would actually get rid of the Cruisers here. The clanking noise going over potholes, it's hard to say. Check your sway bar links. Those will make a racket when they're loose. I had one customer took their truck to several shops for a noise going over speed bumps and stuff. And the multitude of shops, they replaced everything suspension-wise. And it finally came to me because they'd done everything suspension-wise, couldn't find the noise. It turned out the spare tire was flat, and the spare tire being flat made it loose against the mount, and the spare tire was flapping up and down over bumps. All it ended up needing was air in the spare tire. For wire loom, I get a lot of it from Del City. It's like DELCITY, delcity.com. You can get high temp underhood split loom from them. You can get all the different kinds of split loom, but their stuff's really high quality, and relatively good priced, or relatively good prices. And a gym, yeah, that is kind of weird. You'd think you would burn similar going both ways. Maybe the Cruiser was happy to be going home. I don't know. And yeah, I'm digging the new green screen background. Now you guys don't have to look at my messy office anymore. Easiest way to reinstall a gas tank without a lift. Don't take it out. Yeah, I mean, there's not a real easy way to do it. I've done it on your back. It sucks. Harbor Freight makes like a low transmission jack that if you take all the arms off of it, works pretty well for doing a gas tank on the ground, but it's still not a fun job. And Timothy, Toyota U-joints are the way to go. They last forever. I've never broken one. Yeah, they're more expensive than the aftermarket, but they last forever. Blair, what kind of truck are you having pinging in? What kind of dogs? Best guess is Atticus is Blue Heeler Corgi mix, and we're thinking Trilly is probably Black Lab Dachshund. But we're really not sure. They were both rescue dogs. And I guess doing the gas tank on your back, if you can't find one of the low trans jacks, I've done it running ratchet straps, like side to side under the gas tank from frame rail to frame rail, and then you slowly ratchet them up tight to bring the tank up. It's real sketchy and real easy to drop the tank doing it that way, but I have done it that way in the past. 93, 80 series, pinging. My first guess would be bad gas. Like, if you've recently filled up and it started shortly after getting a tank of gas, I would lean that way. My second guess would be timing, ignition timing, but it'd be kind of odd that that would change on its own. Oh, and thanks, Sang. I always appreciate it when people hit the little money button at the bottom. And Zach's chiming in with timing as well. So, yeah, start with timing if you didn't fill up with gas right before the problem started. I mean, I guess you could have a horrible, horrible carbon problem, you know, causing hotspots and detonation. But I wouldn't think so. Like, I haven't seen that happen in a cruiser motor. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, there's nothing else that's really popping up top of my head that would be low speed pinging. Yeah, I wouldn't think EGR at low speed. I've seen EGR not coming on cause pinging at, like, road speeds. But I wouldn't think it would do it at low speed. I mean, it's a possibility. I've had really good luck with the slow trickle of water into a vacuum port and steam cleaning. We've had a couple of trucks that just ran terribly after sitting for forever, and the water steam trick helped out quite a bit. And an LX470, we've had drive shaft issues, like drive shaft slip joints clunk and bang. Trying to think, a CV joint or the drive flanges out at the end. If they're getting really sloppily worn, those can, you know, clank and bang. I haven't seen a bad T-case on a 100 series, you know, cause clanking, banging noises. I mean, anything's possible. We just haven't come across it yet. Trying to think. I mean, you could have like a broken trans mount, letting the trans move around. LX450 clunks when coming to a full stop. My first guess would be like the little brake shims are missing and letting it bang. That's all I can think of without hearing it that would, you know, do it at a full stop. And Ronald, the trail gear, you know, I mean, it depends on what setup they were. A lot of the aftermarket stuff uses 80 series tie rod ends. and it's 23 millimeter. I think it's 23 by 1.5. Yeah, the standard ones seem to be 23 by 1.5, and then there's 21 in the 60 series stuff. And I want to say like the 40 series stuff is like 17. And then, you know, it depends, you know, if they've been swapped into, back in the day it was popular to use 1-ton GM tie rod ends, and I think those are 7/8 fine, but I'm not positive on that one. But I want to say most of the Trail Gear stuff used an 80 series tie rod end, so I think that's 23 millimeter. What kind of truck's it on? Yeah, if your alternator's reading 14.3, it sounds like it's charging, and if the battery is only reading 12 and a half, I would guess fusible link would be my first choice. You know, and then it could be, yeah, fusible link could be my first choice, and then it could just be a broken wire somewhere in the system. And to Steven, yeah, check your spam folder. I responded to the one yesterday and the one today. So I'm not sure why they're not coming through, unless they're going back to spam for some reason on your end. Yeah, they're both showing in my sent folder. So I'm not sure. You're fine. Go ask your mama. Go ask your mama. You guys need to go out? You want to be on the YouTubes? Oh, you want to say hi to the peoples? Ouch. Ow. Dude, you're clawing me. Good tools. Yeah. Zach's got a good... I wouldn't have thought of good multimeter off the top of my head. Yeah, good multimeter. Good set of, you know, open and box end wrenches. A good set of pliers. Um, yeah, there's not really much in the way of specialty tools that you're going to regularly need on an 80 series. And most of any weird ball stuff you'd need Wits End sells, like hub sockets and drivers and stuff like that. And to Sang, I'm pretty sure the 80 series and the 100 series, at least the early 100 series, are the same transfer case. At least as far as the gearing goes. And for the 54mm socket, I'd get the one that Joey at Wits End sells. He's got one that's notched out so that it works on the front and also the rear wheel bearings, which is really handy. And yes, definitely crank holding tool if you're gonna do the crank. And I like the suggestion for mechanics picks. I use mine all the time. I also asked my dentist for a set of worn out, like the dental picks. And those come in handy a lot. Yeah, we go through nitrile gloves by the case. JIS screwdrivers are very handy in the Phillips. They fit the Toyota Phillips better. And Joey at Wits End sells those as well. Oh, and the dogs are driving me nuts. Come on, inside. Even better than the telescoping are the bendy flexible ones that are like a heavy copper wire. I always break the telescoping ones off like when I'm digging for something in a small place, but the flexi ones seem to be more resilient. Yeah, the Knipex Cobras and the Knipex flat-jawed, like, channel lock pliers are awesome. I don't own a set of actual channel locks. I've got the German versions of them. And they are worth their weight in gold. Yeah, lots of extensions, a couple of wobbles. Um, and Ronald, if it's an 80 series, I don't know what they would have used aftermarket, or like what thread they would have used from Trail Gear. There are, I think, 2 different thread pitches, and they may have used all the bigger ones. I think the tie rod ones are the bigger thread. Like if you're ordering them by where they fit. And they may use, they probably don't use all separate, like they don't use drag link and tie rod. It's probably all of the same joint, and I think it's all tie rod joints, but I'm not positive. Yeah, I've been real happy with the Milwaukee cordless impact wrenches. They are awesome. And on the impact sockets, you don't really have to get name brand. All my half-inch drive ones are, just some generic, impact sockets, and they've been going strong for 15 years. I think the 3/8 impacts I've got are all gray pneumatic off of Amazon, and they hold up quite well, and are a lot cheaper than like Snap-on or Mac or Matco. It's funny you say that. Crash has a set of Harbor Freight impact sockets, and yeah, they're holding up well. I think the impact stuff is softer to take the shock loading, so the cheap ones hold up just as well. And that's a good one from Art. I've got one of the. It's like 3 fingers and gears, so as you turn it, it tightens. Oil filter wrench, and those work awesome. And I haven't gotten a 3/4 breaker bar yet, but we use the 1/2-inch breaker bars quite often, especially for getting like the suspension bolts loose and the crank bolt loose. I've got a 3/4 inch drive torque wrench, and they make a breaker bar head for it. I need to get the breaker bar head for that. I don't cut rotors. There's nobody around us that still does it, so I would have to send them to a machine shop like an hour away. And the price of new rotors is so cheap that it doesn't make a lot of sense to go through the time to cut them. And with the newer stuff, the wear limits are so close that by the time you cut them, most of the time you're right on the wear limit, and they're just gonna, wear and warp that much faster. So yeah, we don't ever cut them. I did a set for my 80, just screwing around to see how it would be on the lathe. But it was just screwing around, because you can get new rotors so cheap that cutting them just isn't worth it. And unless you've got an on-car brake lathe, you got to take the rotor off to have it cut anyway, so it doesn't really save anything. And for brake rotors, unless you're going, to something fancy like a drilled and slotted, I really like the factory Toyota rotors. They seem to hold up quite a bit better, than the cheap aftermarket stuff. And they're not that much more expensive, than the aftermarket. And, when you consider, like on a cruiser front, you've got to pull the wheel hub and everything apart in order to get the rotor off. You've got quite a bit of labor there. it's just not worth it to use the cheap aftermarket stuff. So unless somebody's got like really big tires and wants the drilled and slotted stuff, we almost always use factory rotors. And factory pads as well, for that matter. Yeah, we've done quite a few trucks with EBC. I think the oldest one now is probably 8 or 9 months ago, but everybody really digs them. I've got EBCs on my Subaru and really like them. But yeah, we've done EBC rotors and the green stuff pads on quite a few trucks. Yeah, and like the EBC rotors have a couple different levels. Like you can get smooth rotors, drilled, slotted, blah blah blah. We've been running their smooth rotors and I think they're slotted rotors. And, both, at least in the short term, have been excellent. I got green stuff pads for the Shady 80, but I haven't actually driven it yet with them. And we don't see a lot of the GX470s coming through. I mean, we see them every now and then for maintenance, for timing belts and stuff. But we don't get a lot of them in to really, for me to really form an opinion on them. There's like a local Mid-Atlantic overlanding group, and those guys seem to have really high opinions of the GX470. And, from what I've seen, they're built well. Yeah, and they seem to not have the rust issues like the 100 series do, at least locally. Oh, and to Steven, on the EBC rotors and pads, look into seeing if you can find some place that sells them as a package. Like the wholesaler that we get our EBC stuff through does like a pad and rotor set, and it's quite a bit less expensive than if you get the pads and the rotors separately. I'm not sure why, but they seem to lower the cost when you get them as a pair. And to Brian, the benefit of the 100 series pads, they use the same backing plate, but the amount of pad material is there's more pad contact to the rotor. I don't know that there's enough to make any difference. And I've had a couple of times where the 100 series pads are just thick enough that they don't really want to fit into the caliper, unless you've got a slightly worn rotor. So we generally stick with just using 80 series. LX450 with vacuum leaks, there's a bunch of little hoses up under the intake that can pop off with age. Um, there's a couple of vacuum switching valves under there. Usually you'll throw a check engine light, if they've gone bad. But if the hoses are popped off, you may just be leaking underneath. It's hard to say without actually looking at the truck. And if you want, shoot me an email, and I'll get you a price on the EBC rotor set, pad and rotor set that we get through our guys, because they seem to have really good pricing on the EBC brakes. And I haven't seen anybody that does patch panels for an 80 yet. It may be out there, but I haven't seen it. And with no check engine light, you may have a hose popped off. It's just really hard to say. And that's weird, because I just straight replied to both emails. Basically, it said, I'm running behind on doing estimates, so it'll be a couple of days before I get the Burf and Knuckle estimate together. But that I could squeeze you in today or tomorrow for the once-over. Because you caught us in the really weird time where I don't have anything on one of the tall lifts. And I'm just rebuilding a transmission and transfer case and working on exhaust tomorrow. So I can jump off of that and do a once-over if need be. It's not time yet. I'm not sure what you mean by an engine out service on an LX470. Yeah, we could do next week as well. It doesn't make a difference on my end. There's nothing pulling in on the one tall lift this week, because Crash is on the other side on that tall lift, and I'm not using a lift this week because I'm just building his awesome transmissions, and then next week I'll be building exhaust all week. Because Crash will be on vacation. So yeah, it doesn't matter to me. I can fit it in, either way. Tips for finding a coolant leak. The cooling system pressure tester is your friend, and a lot of the part stores, you can rent one. Basically they keep them on hand. You go in, you pay them for it, you use it, you take it back, you get your money back. But fill the cooling system up with water, coolant, whatever, and pressurize it. and then you just look for where the coolant's falling out. That's the easiest way to do it. Cool, and sounds good. And email is the easiest way to get a hold of me. I usually can't hear the phone in the shop, but email pings to my phone in my pocket. And adjustable panhard bars. I mean, any lift over stock is gonna offset you some because you're changing the hypotenuse and shoving it sideways. 2.5 inch lift, you normally can't notice it. 3.5, 4.5 inch lift. It starts being useful. I like Trail Taylor's stuff. He's got some just really high quality products, and that's what I'm gonna go with on my truck. Yeah, if you don't have leaks, I wouldn't go in chasing gaskets and that. It'll get real expensive real quick. Like I want to say we pulled a 100 series motor out to do there's an oil pump O-ring, between the oil pump and the block. We did that, timing belt, I think valve cover gaskets, and I want to say it was in like the neighborhood of $6 or $7 because we had to take the engine out to do the oil pump seal. So it just, it depends on what it needs. But I wouldn't go in there if nothing's broken, because it's just going to be, a really expensive exercise. And yep, we're live right now. Like timing belt, cam and crank seals, valve cover gaskets. Those can all be done with the engine still in the truck. Oil pan seal and oil pump seal are the only ones that really require you to pull the motor. And head gaskets would probably be easier motor out, but I haven't done head gaskets on one yet. And to Vicken, that oil pump O-ring leaking on a 100 series, the one we did is the first one we've seen leak. And I talked to a couple other cruiser guys, and they hadn't seen it either. I haven't seen a 100 series rear main leak yet, I don't think. At least not leaky enough that somebody would have us replace it. But I don't think I've seen any leak at all. And I think there was like 200 and some thousand, like 250,000 on the one that had the oil pump O-ring leak. It's like there's also an O-ring like that in the 80 series timing cover that's in between the timing cover and the block. And we're just now starting to see those leak. I think we've seen 3 of them leaking there now. And it's one of those, you go in, you do the oil pump cover O-ring and all that, and you've still got a leak. And you power wash it all off, and it's actually the timing cover. 100 series with brakes acting funky and the alarm going off. It's likely the brake booster pump motor failing. If the pump motor fails, it'll do that light and sounds. It could be the accumulator, it could be a broken brake line, but it's likely the pump motor. You know, without seeing it, there's no way of knowing for sure. I want to say the pump motor is around 1500. Okay, yeah, if the fluid's not lowering, it's probably the pump motor. And the pump motor, I think, is like 1500-ish. And it's kind of a pain to change. Not necessarily. They'll get really soft with the pump motor because there's no booster other than the pump motor, and you lose the accumulator pressure. And without the accumulator pressure, they get squishy. It could, be the ABS assembly or the master cylinder itself. I've seen people do the master cylinder rebuild kit. We've done the pump itself a couple of times. Two of the 4 times we've done the pump, something in the ABS has failed shortly thereafter, so now we just recommend doing the entire assembly. So it's like the pump, the accumulator, the master, and the ABS block. But that's like a $3,100 part. Like anything 100 series ABS is going to be expensive. And no, it is not normal for your 80 series coolant reservoir to always be empty. Hopefully you've got a hose leak somewhere. Like you can look up under the intake and see if the pesky heater hose is weeping. Bad end of the spectrum, you could have a head gasket that's leaking coolant and burning it, so you don't see an external leak. And yeah, Zach's in the right direction. Codes, especially if you got the warning lights and the alarm went off, there will be codes left in the system. And, the pump and the whole assembly both aren't super difficult to change. But you need access to a factory scan tool to bleed the ABS block and the accumulator after you're done to get the air out. Tools necessary for drive shaft U-joints in 100. I mean, really a hammer, a block of wood, and, various sockets to fit the different U-joint caps. They make special tools for doing it, but half the time we just do them with a hammer and sockets. We have like a junk set of, old sockets that we use just for changing U-joints. And thanks for the tip, Steven. I appreciate it. Good scan tool. I don't have a really good opinion on that. I've got a Snap-on Solus, but that's, really expensive, for homeowner use. We've also got both of the factory Toyota scan tools for when we need them. And to what state we're in. We're in Virginia, about an hour south of D.C. Safety glasses is a very good point for changing U-joints. And my word of wisdom, get at least one extra U-joint than what you think you're going to need, because I always ruin at least one. It never fails that I get, one of the rollers crushed, or cock one of the bearing caps. Like, crash can do them, and, never break one. I always kill a U-joint when I'm doing a set. If it's clicking, if it's making noise, it's already shot. So there's no real sense in rebooting it. And we generally don't reboot them anyway for leaking, because by the time you get through the labor of changing the boots, like taking the boots off, cleaning everything, stripping the joints, putting it all back together, repacking it, you're already really close to the price of a new axle. And you figure by the time they're leaking, they're usually in the upper 100,000 miles. So they're already starting to get worn. I like the way Sam thinks with hitting the like button and the money button and making it rain. And Zach has a good point that if grease is leaking to the outside, then dirt is getting to the inside. Yeah, and he's putting it very succinctly that it's a false economy to reboot. That just condensed my whole why we don't reboot them down very short. And yeah, on an 80 series, it's normal for high idle for a couple of minutes. I'm assuming it's to get oil pressure up and flowing, but it seems to, it tapers the idle down as the coolant comes up to temp. But yeah, it's normal for them to idle 1,000, 1,200, for a couple of minutes. Awesome. Glad the video was helpful. That CV fought me worse than I think any other CV replacement on a 100 series has. Normally I can do one in, around an hour in and out. And I think that one took me 3 hours. I wouldn't necessarily check anything if it's not high idling at first startup. It may just be warm enough out that the computer's happy and doesn't feel like it needs to idle it higher. Generally on the new computer controlled stuff, if the computer's not happy, it'll give you a check engine light and throw a code. So I wouldn't necessarily take that it doesn't idle up at first startup, as something wrong, without a check engine light and a code to back it up. Yeah, we'll fire something up and totally forget that the AC's on, and be like, oh, why is this thing idling so high? And why is it fluctuating? And then it's like, oh, the AC's turning on and off. But if you guys don't mind, I'll answer Vicken's question real quick before I jump off of here. How do we check for bad head gasket on a 1FC? First thing we'll do is there's like a color changing fluid that you put, like, you draw the air out of the top of the radiator through this coolant, and if there's exhaust gases in it, it changes the coolant from blue to yellow. That's our first check. If that fails or doesn't show anything, we'll usually move on to doing a cylinder leak down test, where you bring each cylinder up to top dead center and pump air in through the spark plug hole. And if you see, if you see bubbles coming up through the coolant, then you know it's a head gasket. And the leak down test gives you the added benefit of knowing which cylinder the leak is on, because you're doing them each individually. So yeah, I'm gonna jump off of here for the evening. I gotta get the dog's dinner. And then I've got to do front brakes and tires on my wife's Prius this evening, so she can go get a safety inspection in the morning. But yeah, thanks to everybody that tuned in. Thanks for the folks that hit the money button down there at the bottom. It's always appreciated. If you dig the videos and dig the chats, check out our Patreon link. The support, always welcomed. And I will catch you guys back here again next Tuesday. Thanks again for tuning in.